Well, super excited here to kicking off what hopefully becomes a much more regular occurrence with everyone. Joining the roster in today's discussion about Perps DEXs more generally is Yenwen from Perpetual Protocol. He's one of the co-founders there. We also have Duncan, who's an advisor to GMX. I believe he's currently a research analyst at Delphi as well. And on our end, we have Cindy, who's one of our co-founders here at Drift Protocol. It's an absolute superstar of a panel today from the top Perps DEXs and probably from some of the top contributors to Perps DEXs in the space at the moment as well. So I'm really excited to kick this off. I'm Damian. I lead BD here at Drift, and I'll be moderating most of the discussion today. But before we kick off, let's do like a quick introduction from each of you. Perhaps how you got into the space, what you were doing before, and what your protocol is aiming to achieve and to resolve. So Yenwen, I'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Yenwen. I'm one of co-founder of Perpetual Protocol. So Perpetual Protocol is a decentralized perpetual swap DEX. So I mean, like you can go on our Perpetual Protocol and you can trade. Any market like with like 10x, like long and short. I think we are different from others that we built on top of Uniswap v3. It got all the like nice features from Uniswap v3 that you can concentrate the liquidity. I mean, like you can be the liquidity provider, provide the liquidity, but just follow the same rule as Uniswap v3. So it's easy to transition from a Uniswap v3 liquidity provider to Perp. We provide leverage, so you can actually provide liquidity with leverage. So it's very different. Yeah, so I think that's the main difference. For Perpetual Protocol, and for myself, I used to, working Scalp for Web2, like for a long time, and I think end of 2017, we saw CryptoKitty. I'm actually really excited about like crypto games at that time, I used to do games, so I kind of like really interested, and so we actually pivot, and then we want to do games, and actually didn't go anywhere because it's really hard. I think like crypto games has like we don't really know that I think the demand is not that strong. But we then find out that the whole like DeFi is really interesting, although there is no DeFi yet at that time. But we see like Compound, we see Banker, no Uniswap yet, but that's really exciting time. So we start working on like different kinds of like DeFi projects, and then I think 2000 we start Perpetual Protocol. So it's been a while, but it's really an interesting journey. Yeah, that's it from my end.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. Thank you for that introduction. And Duncan, how about you for GMX?
Yeah, so I'm an analyst at Delphi Digital, mostly for focusing on like DeFi. And I came across GMX in November of 2021 as they kind of like kicked off their launch on Arbitrum. And I thought it was a really interesting model, and just started kind of helping out the team with some design aspects, and then ended up joining as an advisor. So GMX, I guess like the goal of the project is to be like kind of the best place to do spot swaps and leverage trading on any chain it launches on. So right now we're on Arbitrum and Avalanche, and then I'm pretty sure we're the second highest leverage trading exchange behind DYDX. We offer up to 30x leverage long and short, and have facilitated, I think we just hit 50 billion in volume yesterday. And then kind of on the liquidity provider side, we have a unique liquidity provision strategy called GLP, which is like a passive strategy. I'll get more into the weeds on that probably later in the podcast, but it's kind of a combination of Bitcoin, ETH, and stable coins, and a few others that has like outperformed like kind of those underlying assets, which has kind of been hard to find in the passive liquidity provision space due to all like the impermanent loss.
Thank you for that, Duncan. And yeah, we'll definitely get deeper into each of the design mechanisms behind each protocol later in this. For now, Cindy, if you could give a quick introduction about yourself and Drift as well.
Sounds good. So Drift, like GMX and Perp, is also a Perp futures DEX. We're built on Solana. So I think we're the only non-EVM Perp DEX here today. We use a hybrid liquidity mechanism that sources liquidity from 3 sources. So one is a just-in-time liquidity auction that external makers can participate in, just like the GLP. We'll go into that a little bit later. A decentralized limit order book that's run by a network of keepers that validate a network, similar to how an app chain might be validated. They keep an order book, a copy of the order book locally, and use that to essentially match orders with each other. And finally, we also use a backstop virtual AMM that we call the dynamic AMM, DAM for short. And the DAM essentially, I think was inspired a lot by Perpetual Protocol's original V1 VAMM, and also GMX's Oracle-based live pricing model. So this should be an interesting discussion on how all these ideas are kind of synthesized together in each of our protocols. And yeah, our V2 will actually be coming live in September. We initially launched our V1 last year in November. And our peak, we had, I think, cumulative about $10 billion in volume and about 15K traders. So yeah, I think we sunset that a couple months ago, and now we're working on our V2, which we're looking to launch as soon as we can. Our goal really is to bring a centralized exchange trading experience on chain. I think similar to you guys, helping to bridge the gap of UX within the Perp futures design space and bring as much liquidity as possible on chain for traders. Really excited for the chat with you all today.
That was really well put, Cindy. Well, look, before we dive too deeply into each of our protocol designs, I think I want to take a step back and just talk more generally about like the landscape and perhaps why we're all here. We're probably all aligned on the mission of bringing the centralized experience of trading perps on chain and how valuable that is to our users and customers as well. I think for wider context, the gross market value for derivatives contracts in TradFi is estimated to be around 12 trillion. And at its peak, crypto derivatives across all trading venues was upwards of around 3 trillion. And today, crypto derivatives is around 60% of all trading volume across all cryptocurrency assets. But the more interesting thing perhaps is that decentralized perpetuals volume only accounts for about 2% of the entire volume traded across DEXs. So I would love to step back and just get each of your opinions as well as to perhaps why you think this is the case. We can start with you, Yenwen.
If you compare Uniswap, to Perpetual DEX, Uniswap is doing much better than Perpetual DEX. I think the major reason is this a whole crypto summer liquidity mining. So for everyone who want to create a token, you can create a pool on Uniswap. You can do liquidity mining. You can you can invite everyone to provide liquidity there, and then so you have trading volume there. I think that's really kind of a great way to boost. I think Uniswap have done this really well. If you look at the Perpetual DEX side, there are some projects doing this. One can launch a market, but I think the goal is different. I think it's more like traders. They want to trade those big markets. They want to trade ETH, BTC. Those markets they know. They trade a lot of volume there. They run many different strategy. Across different exchange. So it's this different that makes Perpetual DEX cannot grow as fast as Uniswap because I don't think there is a strong interest from the project side that want to deploy a perpetual market. Besides having a spot market and then run liquidity mining, get my token more liquid. So that's I think one reason. The second reason is that actually the UX on central exchange is still better, at least compared to a Perpetual Protocol. I think FTX scale, works better, smoother, more feature, more liquidity. That's something that we are still working at. But at least for kind of a trader who who want to run a strategy, who care about a P&L, I think scale, I mean, central exchange has an edge there. So it just gives two reasons. I think it's scale. That's why like the decentralized DEX, I mean, a perpetual DEX is still behind. But like a composability, I think most of us, I mean, we haven't fully like have a lot of project built on top of us, not like Uniswap. But I think once that happen, they actually can bring more volume, like there are more interaction, and then it will be like exponential growth because of like composability. That's just my thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think I reiterate a lot of those thoughts as well. Like if we think about it, centralized exchanges have almost like one cycle ahead of decentralized exchanges. So they have that like 4-year head start on a lot of perps trading, and that's probably consequential with how their UX and how like perhaps like other features might be a bit more advanced as well. But it's without a doubt like we're definitely catching up. Okay, for you, Duncan, I have a question here about how do you think perhaps the user experience differs across on-chain and off-chain perps?
Yeah, so my answer is definitely going to overlap a little bit, but I guess like the biggest thing kind of starting like from kind of like first principles is that sexes are primarily based on like an order book perpetual futures market, and we haven't really seen the tech quite get there in a decentralized way. So like the closest experience on chain would probably be DYDX, but they still have like their order book and matching engine run on AWS, so it's not really decentralized. And then like other perp DEXs like GMX have tried to innovate with their Oracle pricing of assets. Perp v2 is using a VAMM plus UniV3, and then Drift is kind of making strides in like this just-in-time liquidity, and I'm sure Cindy will talk more about the model. But yeah, so I think that's kind of the first thing is like we haven't been able to really like offer comparable like execution to like the order book, because like so far like I think that's pretty agreed upon that it's a superior method, but the tech quite isn't there, and we don't know if that is going to end up being the superior method on blockchains, right? So and I think like this kind of like ties into like market makers. So our market makers is comfortable providing liquidity on kind of like a method that they're not super familiar with, and then that is kind of like a cycle between where's the like there's kind of a chicken and the egg problem where it's where's the liquidity versus where's the trading volume happening. And you need good liquidity to get a lot of trading volume, but you need a lot of trading volume to like generate the fees for people to be incentivized to provide that liquidity. So I think that there's a bit of a cycle there, but again, definitely agree with Yenwen on that. The decentralized exchanges have a big advantage in the composability aspect of DeFi, and I think that's going to be a bigger thing in the future. 100% think that's going to be a bigger thing. And then also like decentralized exchanges, like a lot of crypto is just kind of built around like making similar products finance, but in a decentralized way, and that can be super valuable. So like being able to use it directly from MetaMask, having this non-custodial kind of like aspect to it, and then also just like other composability with the DeFi. I think those are the biggest things.
Yeah, that's very well put, Duncan. Thank you very much for that. Okay, well, to wrap this section up, Cindy, what do you think on-chain perps need to do in particular in order to bridge this gap? And perhaps what are some of the benefits to trading on-chain?
Yeah, I think DEXs are not going to be able to just import what a centralized exchange does and kind of like, think that it's going to function the same way. So you couldn't really bring like an order book on chain and expect it to function without the trade-offs of being on a blockchain. So I think DEXs or perp DEXs in particular are going to need to be really creative with types of liquidity mechanisms. And I think, you guys here today are really cool alternatives to the order book model. It's like proven to work, right? And I think it's like understated how crazy like innovative some of these mechanisms are compared to like just bringing literally like an order book and trying to bring it on chain or trying to settle orders off chain. So I think the winning perp DEX UX is going to be something that really leverages the like trade-offs of being a blockchain. right? Like it's not going to be as fast, but maybe it has different speed trade-offs that, yeah, maybe it settles on it, and a roll up that it builds on its own, or something like that, right? So yeah, I think that's like one of our key thesis in how we've built our DEX as well. That yeah, we can't really rely on these ideas that centralized exchanges have put up. And on top of that, I think a couple more small, or maybe not small, UX fixes and things that need to be improved on are things like even depositing funds to a DEX can be very tough at the moment. Maybe I'm just speaking from a Solana point of view, but bridging from ETH to Solana is still a massive pain. You kind of have to go through FTX. None of the bridges are really working as intended, at least at big size. So I think depositing, bridging, still like a huge barrier in getting users to deposit funds. It's not as smooth as just transferring funds from your bank, or clicking a deposit button from any chain, right? And then I think on the educational side, helping users to onboard and understand why being having your funds in a non-custodial exchange is super important. We've had numerous CeFi exchanges blow up in the last couple of months, just due to the volatility of the markets. But perp DEXs and leveraged futures on chain are still functioning fine. So I think having that, like, why it's important to be able to see where your funds are being held in a smart contract, and educating users on that front is pretty key to, I think, bridging that UX gap. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to hop back in on just trying to provide everyone in like an example for like the composability point of view, because I think we're all kind of in alignment. That's going to be really important. Like as Cindy said, it's gonna be really difficult for us to compete like strictly on fees, like execution, like latency. Like the DEXs are probably gonna have an upper hand on that. But like in terms of composability, an example might be like cross margining like an LP share from a different DeFi protocol, and using that as margin within like a decentralized perp DEX. So just as an example, but these like interesting features that you can kind of implement that just like aren't possible on chain, because like you can't use those forms of collateral.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, yeah, to echo on that point, like a couple of really interesting like composability, things, especially if you can do it cross chain. It's like maybe you could build a contract that like atomically arbs between like GMX and Drift, or GMX and Perp, and that helps balances the price on both exchanges more easily. And you could even run like different types of basis trading strategies on that. But yeah, I think that kind of brings like a new type of flow and volume on these exchanges that you don't see on centralized exchanges.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of a couple more examples, just so the listeners have some ideas. Like for instance, since GMX is built on Arbitrum, like there's quite a few other DeFi apps there. So I think like Drawbacks is trying to integrate doing these kind of providing options on your like leverage trading. So like it makes you like unliquidatable because you have an option hedging you for like a fee, or Umami, who's building kind of like a delta neutral strategy on top of GLP, which I can kind of touch on later. But like this composability is stuff that can't really happen on centralized exchanges.
Definitely agree with both of your thoughts there. And I think perhaps what stood out to me the most from what you said, Cindy, is very much how innovation is kind of overlooked in this space. Like obviously the three of you guys are participating in building protocols that are at the forefront and are at the frontier of perpetual DEXs on each of your chains as well. So what really interests me and what really draws me is how there's no right way to do anything yet. And each of us are sort of approaching the same solution with a different method of offering that solution to our users. And so to sort of dive into that a little bit more, like we can talk a bit more on our actual protocol specifics now and how we actually facilitate Perps trading to our end user. To start with you, Yenwen, obviously Perp had sort of led this charge on the innovation of the original AMM, the pioneering the VAMM, and then the protocol since iterated beyond that. Can you talk us a bit through about the designs and perhaps what led you guys here?
I think Perpetual Protocol is one of the oldest. Perpetual DEXs besides DEXs. I think they stopped earlier. So DEXs start with like older book. But personally, we are more kind of like in the group of AMs. I personally believe in AM a lot. I really like Uniswap. I think that's actually just, it's not only like kind of like temporary solution to the blockchain. I think like AM will be the future because Uniswap kind of like demonstrate that using AM, using such a simple like construction, they can get more volume than the centralized DEX. So centralized exchange. So I think that's really interesting. So we have been spending a lot of time. Trying to. I think our main focus is how can we have leverage on top of Uniswap style AM. So we build like Perp V1, which we start this like virtual AM model that take Uniswap V2 style like XYK, and then how we can leverage on that. It's quite interesting, and at that time we have we face some issues like long short skew. We discussed within a community before that we don't really have a good answer to like what happened if most people getting long position and the pool itself getting a lot of short position. How can we balance that? Actually, Drift did a lot of good job on like how to solve that. But we actually went through a lot of different designs, but we think that's a hard question. The second thing is that seeing like Uniswap V3, we really want that concentrated liquidity. I think that's really interesting way to providing liquidity and then to actually winning over the older book. So so in the end we have this Perpetual Protocol V2 that built on top of Uniswap V3, like I mentioned. So we have this knowledge that we can kind of mint a virtual token, for any market, and then deposit into Uniswap V3 and then try to recalculate the fees, lots of work. But in the end, the traders can get up to 10x leverage. The liquidity provider can have that as well. So I think that's the main advantage we have. The second thing is that the Perpetual, Protocol V2, we have market collateral. So which means that not only you can deposit Uniswap, USDC as stablecoin. You can also deposit ETH and other asset in order to trade. So you can actually build lots of interesting strategy, like you deposit ETH and then trade ETH. You can deposit ETH and show ETH. There are many different things that you can do, and then it gradually, it just greatly increase the capital efficiency. So I think that's really cool. So I think that's pretty much about Perpetual Protocol. We have been in the field for a long time, so I think that we have a great team that really know how to kind of build, create leverage on chain. I do want to talk about that something. We don't know before we build V2. So this, like I said, Uniswap is really good. A really interesting model, but LP on Uniswap V3 is really hard. We kind of underestimate how hard it is. So we struggle on that. That's something we don't expect it. So Uniswap V3 has been up for more than a year. We are actually getting good at that. Providing liquidity. We know people are actually getting good at how to provide liquidity, although it's still hard. So that's something that I want to mention. Just it's hard, but I think that it's not something that we cannot achieve. So the team working on this with others. So that's an interesting question to solve, and it's actually our kind of like when we design it, we just don't know like how hard it is. But anyway, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. That's a very, very great response. Yeah, and I think to anyone listening as well, like I would implore you guys to check out Perp Protocol's Content Hub. You guys do really excellent content, and I think I've spoken to one of the content guys from your team as well. You guys put out really great onboarding guides and really great in-depth walkthroughs about your VAMM and about your V2 design as well.
Yeah, thanks.
I think, yeah, Cindy, I think you had a question for Perp around one of the designs. So I might let you take over for this one.
Yeah, I think the UniV3 model applied to perps is super interesting, and I think you're right as well that it's relatively hard for like an average person to kind of understand like, hey, what ranges am I supposed to set, especially if it's leveraged, right? That adds like an additional layer of complexity there. Have you guys dealt with any, I guess, issues with like sudden withdrawals from these big LP pools, since like liquidity is so dependent on there? And I guess, do you have any mechanisms to like hedge against these big changes in liquidity?
Yeah, I think there's two parts. The first thing is that what happened if there's an LP, he has a strategy that he will withdraw like once the volatility goes high. So we saw like everything and then put it back, and then everyone actually doing that. So you see like our slippage actually up and down, and then going to like really random. I don't know, like really hard to trade, I would say. That's might happen, to be honest. But if we look at like Uniswap V3 closely, actually Dan just has a presentation in ETC. From Uniswap team that is playing like just in time like liquidity. They're only like less than like 0.5% of people doing that. So I think most of people still trying to provide liquidity within like at least like several minutes. That's at least like I heard from some LP they provide like in minutes, but I haven't heard anyone like provide per block or like per second. So that's at least that's not really happening right now. At least, and also from what we see on our exchange, it doesn't look like that. So so that's not kind of like urgent. I think we need to solve. But still, creating a new market. So we have this like when we create a market is that we will provide kind of like a baseline like liquidity. So it's a Uniswap V2 style. From the foundation. So we just like putting the fund there for every market. So it's kind of like just provide this like best baseline that you can scale trade. Like for every traders. I think that's actually one of the reasons that make it hard for us to let everyone create their own market, because the people who create the market need to make sure there is a liquidity somewhere, and then it's actually it's if we have a criteria that everyone who create a market need to provide liquidity, kind of like a down payment for that market, I don't really know that. It's like how many people can do this, and then should we have kind of like is it kind of like for like for a very long time until the market close or something? So it's a hard question. So right now we don't actually let everyone create their own market. So the DAO will provide like baseline liquidity. That's it. Yeah.
So I guess like, who do you guys see as your target liquidity provider? Because like as you said, like market making on UniV3 is pretty hard, and like on aggregate, I think like most UniV3 pools have generated like kind of more in impermanent loss than fees. But obviously that's a big generalization because like professional market makers can definitely do that profitably. So like, are you thinking like leaning more into UniV3, like attracting these professional market makers, or have you guys considered something like more like of a curve V2 concentrated liquidity to like attract passive liquidity, or you want to stick more with kind of these professional market makers?
Both. But at least like right now we talk to like professional market makers, and then like there are like new market maker, new traders, like trying to like kind of like attract them to provide liquidity here. I actually don't think there are lots of like market maker like good at like providing liquidity on Uniswap style in especially B3 like concentrated ones. So still like working with them, trying to find that. That's one part, but the second part is that we are also working with the kind of strategy providers like pools, like you mentioned. So there are people like trying to provide liquidity with an options like to hedge it. There are different ways. I mean, like from the back test, it looks good. So we probably need to wait until it launch and then see how it goes. But I would say there are really a lot of people trying to solve this problem. And to be honest, I think the problem has already solved by maybe like some of the teams, but we just, they just don't public it yet because as you see, Uniswap trading volume is, like, I mean, not trading, I mean, the liquidity on Uniswap just goes higher and higher. Even though like it's hard question is, like some of the people still providing a lot of liquidity there. They must know something. So I think our goal is like maybe like someday they want to share and then everyone can be profit, or we know like what they know. Yeah. So, but I think we are getting there.
Well, we can move on to GMX's design next as well. I think Duncan, GMX is probably one of the more novel mechanisms. I think your multi-asset pools, I'm going to be honest, like I think it's probably one of the more confusing ones that I'm not too clear about either. So we'd love to hear, talk a little bit about it and perhaps how your design facilitates trading.
Yeah, for sure. So it's a little bit different than like an order book or a typical AMMs. All the trading on GMX is facilitated through a liquidity pool called GLP. And I'm just going to like simplify the assets in GLP, but let's just say it's 25% Bitcoin, 25% ETH, then 50% stables. And then on Avalanche, it has some Avalanche, and on Arbitrum, it has a little bit of like Lincoln. So basically you have this like kind of target weight of 25% BTC, 25% ETH, 50% stables. And it has this like additional flexibility to a typical AMM because it's not calculating its price based on like the ratio of assets within the pool. So like in a Uni V2 AMM, like it's calculating its price based on like a ratio of assets in the pool. And instead GLP calculates its price by pulling like using an oracle to pull prices from centralized exchanges. So this like offers it quite a bit of flexibility within the pool for these balances to kind of get like temporarily out of whack, which like allows for like a lot of utilization. And basically like how it would work if a user wants to enter a long position, let's say there's like 100 Bitcoin in the pool, like there's 100 Bitcoin that can be like long. So you essentially would rent out the upside of the Bitcoin within that pool. And then for a short position, you would kind of reserve those stable coins in terms of the notional amount. Like I would say like the real kind of secret sauce of GLP is the fact that it's borrowing prices from centralized exchanges. So as we just kind of discussed with Yenwen, like market making is really difficult, especially on chain. So GMX is kind of just like borrowing all the hard work that market makers are doing on centralized exchanges and then kind of reflecting that for the passive liquidity within GLP. So like anyone can deposit into GLP and market makes for you. And you're essentially just like borrowing the price from centralized exchanges. This has allowed it to have a super high utilization. Liquidity providers are like quite profitable over just kind of holding those underlying like the underlying index since we kind of launched in September 1st. But I guess like the downside to kind of like not paint everything so great is like there is a chance that like GLP is actually the counterparty to all these trades. So if traders are super profitable on GMX, then the GLP pool will have to pay out stable coins or kind of like that crypto collateral. But like so far, fees have kind of like well, first of all, traders haven't been profitable, but fees kind of make up like a much greater loss than you would experience just kind of holding the underlying assets.
That's very interesting. I think Yenwen from Perp has a question as well, and I think Cindy has one afterwards as well.
Sure. I mean, like the GLP design is really interesting. I mean, like I really like synthetic design, but GMX actually took it to another level. I think that's really good. One question about the new like a GMX synthetics model, kind of like it depends on like other trader. Is it possible for me to know what my profit is if it goes up like from like 2,000 to 3,000 or something like that?
Yeah, so the synthetic model is like still in the works, and I think like we're still kind of like exploring all options, but the main goal is to offer like additional assets to trade. So like I guess like some options are kind of having a stable coin like version of GLP where you'd have to kind of balance the longs and shorts, right? So like different incentive mechanisms to balance long and shorts. Like you guys just added, it seems like the ETH collateral on Perp V2. So people, because obviously like within crypto, a lot of these traders want to be long. So there's typically a long skew. So like Perp V2 just added like ETH collateral. So now you can kind of do like the cash and carry trade where you deposit collateral in ETH and then go 1x short the Perp to collect funding. So like there's different methods like that to kind of balance the long and short. I don't think we're fully set on the GD model yet. And then like we're also exploring kind of like bridging assets in. But I guess like that post was made a few months ago, and then there's kind of been like a bunch of speculation since. But I don't think we've kind of like completely nailed down the exact design we want to go to, and it's still under development. So like obviously stay posted for what's gonna be happening with that. But I think the main goal is to be able to provide like more assets on the platform. And like you said, like when people are like listing these new markets, like liquidity is an issue. So like how can we bootstrap liquidity? How can we make sure the long short skew is kind of balanced and offer like a good experience for traders and also like LPs that are kind of able to make money. So those are all the things we're kind of thinking through, but I know that's not like an exact answer to your question because I'm just not sure if we've like fully settled on the GD token model.
Yeah, super interesting GMX model as well. Always been a big fan. One thing I'm curious about is how does the target rate get calculated, and how does that change whenever you add a new asset in that pool?
The target rates are set by governance and can kind of be like voted to be changed. And then how we kind of keep the assets balanced is because GLP does like not only margin trading. So not only can I kind of like rent out this upside in Bitcoin or ETH or kind of like reserve these stables to go short. Like that's how it works in the back end. But obviously like the UX is like any other kind of leverage trading exchange. But there's also spot swaps. So you can also execute trades at the Oracle price. And basically how GMX keeps its balances is for like if an asset's underweight to its target, then like the fees to swap into it will be extremely low and to kind of encourage traders to swap into that asset. Or if someone's depositing into GLP or withdrawing from GLP, it'll also affect the fees that they incur there. So that's kind of how we aim to target the weights. And then in terms of like listing more assets in the future, like what gets included in the GLP, I think we're like exploring more GLPs, like kind of like different baskets. So maybe we'd have like an L1 GLP, which would have just like maybe like Solana, ETH, Avalanche, kind of some of these L1s within it. And then maybe we'd have like a DeFi GLP. So it doesn't all have to be under this like same aggregated liquidity pool. But I think for now, just being like the majority of it containing like Bitcoin, ETH, and stables on Arbitrum, and then Bitcoin, ETH, Avalanche, and stables on Avalanche. It's working well, but definitely those are things that we're considering like moving forward to kind of support more assets.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I think I'm starting to understand the design a little bit more. It's obviously so extremely different from existing AMMs and also the order book mechanism. Last but not least, Cindy on Drift. Drift also obviously has its own unique system. Our DAM iterated on top of Perp's original VAMM. Just talk a bit about why that was necessary and how we've sort of grown the DAM now to include a host of other mechanisms like the just-in-time system.
Yeah, so in our V1, we had one liquidity mechanism, which was just a virtual AMM that wasn't backed by collateral, and it introduced a couple of features like auto repegging of the curve. So whenever price moves to a certain point, Oracle price moves from the initial terminal price of the AMM. we essentially, in our V1, would use fees generated by the protocol to repeg the curve to be closer to the current local price. Essentially, we had to sunset a protocol due to some severe long-short imbalances and a P&L smart contract bug in May that was triggered by the Luna market. And since then, we've sort of been working on a lot of mechanisms to, number one, make sure that the VAMM isn't the only counterparty in the system. Because essentially what happens is you have this pool of capital that that's generated by the fees from the protocol that becomes kind of the collateral for the counterparty of the exchange. So it doesn't actually allow anybody external to come in and also become a market maker. So that was an issue that constrained the liquidity of the EMM as well. While the VMM could provide infinite K, that was a limit to how much this could go because it was constrained by the fees collected by the protocol. So what sort of happened was, you get a lot of toxic arbitrage flow and no ways for external market makers to like reprice the trades, right? And I guess when pricing everything on an EMM, especially leveraged assets, can also be quite dangerous for the protocol. So our goal for V2 was to create a way for other makers to come in, professional market makers, and also retail participants to become passive makers on the platform, and sort of have this like vibrant ecosystem of different counterparties in the exchange. And then secondly, we wanted a more efficient way to price assets on the platform to enable more liquidity for traders. So in our V2, we sort of have this system that incorporates 3 liquidity mechanisms that we talked about earlier. So we have the overarching mechanism, I guess, is this keeper network that keeps orders matched on the exchange, limit orders and market orders as well. So how market orders start to get filled is through this thing called just-in-time liquidity mechanism. It's sort of an auction that triggers every time a market order is placed in the exchange. So think about it as like a high-frequency Dutch auction. And that gets priced based on the AMM prices that we have. So we have like a bid price for an AMM, and we have an ask price for the AMM as well, which I'll go into a little bit more later. But that's how it sort of differs from an RFQ system, because the auction itself is already priced, and it starts at the best price improvement possible for takers, and it ends at the sort of like best price for the makers. So makers are trying to get the order flow. They would try to front run other makers and try to put the order in as soon as possible, which will lead to the best price improvement for retail. So we really like the system because it incentivizes makers to compete against each other for retail and taker flow, and in turn provide kind of the best price instead of like kind of extracting value from the user. And outside of that, for limit orders, how they're filled is so it's like sort of a P2P order book mechanism, but the order book is held by a group of different, we call them keepers. They all host a local copy of the order book off chain, but use kind of listen to the network to see orders coming in, and then fill and maker orders against each other whenever there's a matching order. So orders typically go through taker orders go through the JIT auction first, and then limit orders that are just like resting liquidity get filled by keepers. And finally, I know this is going a little bit over, but we also have the AMM that provides backstop liquidity in case there's no liquidity on the JIT auction side and on the limit order side as well. So the AMM is a virtual AMM. It's similar to our V1 DMM, except that it also prices assets based on an oracle, and it also has a bid and ask spread. So similar to how a regular market maker functions, it alters its best bid and best ask prices based on its own inventory skew and the oracle price of the market and how much volatility there is in the market as well. So yeah, overall, that's how we've believe leads to better pricing overall for takers.
Yeah, that's super cool. I think the just-in-time auctions are really interesting. I'm excited to see how those play out, and also like dynamically adjusting like the bid and ask spread, and also like the bid ask based on kind of like the long short skew of the VAMM. Like, yeah, I'm pretty excited to see that. That's definitely like a lot of innovation. So I'm really excited to see how that plays when it's live. I'm kind of putting on like my geek researcher hat here. Like I've researched all of like the DeFi perp design. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we'd love to have you guys play around with it when we're on DevNet.
Yenwen, did you have a question on the JIT expiry system?
Yeah, sure. Agree that the just in time, I mean, JIT is really interesting. I mean, like, because it's an ocean, it has this like several seconds delay because you have to go through the process. So my question, how do you handle that the composability blockchain, everything kind of like falls, you have to do everything in one block? So just curious that do you guys, I mean, like have any like workaround on that so you can be more composable?
Yeah, so I think that's like a drawback of the liquidity mechanism, that the actual taker orders or the market orders are not necessarily atomically composable. So you couldn't you do a flash loan and then return that flash loan within the same block, because you have to wait 5 seconds. But the taker limit orders are composable. So you could take somebody's resting liquidity within the same transaction. So that, I guess, has some flexibility for composability. And maybe we could also in future add a way to bypass the JIT auction and go directly to the AMM for composability. But yeah, at the moment, it's a bit difficult to do atomic transactions with the JIT auction. So that's one drawback of the issue as well. So I'm actually curious how GMX, you guys, I know that there's like a 5-second waiting period for you guys as well, for the Oracle price to kind of like set in, right? So how do you guys deal with composability on that end?
So our spot swaps work a little bit different than our perp swaps. So like our spot swaps just kind of like execute immediately at the last updated price. So like a market order for any like margin trade will update the price, or like every 5 seconds, or every certain amount of price deviation. Like there's all these kind of metrics that'll update the price. But then the spot swaps, like when you submit an order through 1inch on to like swap to BTC on Arbitrum or ETH on Arbitrum, then that's actually just using like the latest price that GMX is updated to, and that updates quite frequently. But yeah, definitely a good question. But like kind of the perp flow is a little bit different. So I guess it'd basically be like trader submits an order. If it's within their kind of slippage band, or sorry, trader submits an order, the keeper will go and pull from the Oracle or check the centralized exchange, and then the order is executed to kind of like prevent that toxic arbitrage flow. So that part, I think there's definitely going to be, like you said, like some like, it's not going to be as simple as just our spot swaps, which just kind of execute at the latest price.
Well, if you guys don't have any other questions on Drift design, perhaps
I have one more question regarding Drift. I guess, like, do you think the majority of trades will be filled by like this JIT auction, or do you think it'll be to like kind of fall back to the VMM? And then like, how do you think kind of volatility in the market would change that? Like, I'm really interested to know, like, as you said, like during more volatile times, like the spread, like the bid-ask spread increases, like that's a really fascinating design, like kind of similar to Curve V2, like increased volatility, they'll increase fees. So I think that's really cool. I'd love to learn more about kind of how that works.
Yeah, I guess we haven't seen this in action yet, so I'm also curious to see myself. But so far, you know, we've speaking to a lot of I guess professional market makers to become participants in the JIT, and they've mostly been very interested because sort of like similar to payment for order flow for like Robinhood, let's say, where you get exclusive access to taker flow that you can't really find elsewhere. So kind of market makers want to compete for that. And so I think that the way we've set it up should incentivize a lot of market makers to come in, especially if there's inefficient pricing during volatile periods, you might get a better fill on our exchange versus elsewhere. So I think it largely depends on kind of the amount of taker flow as well during that time versus like smarter passive resting orders on the exchange. But yeah, I'm also curious to see how it plays out. I do agree that during volatile periods, there is a risk that these MMs might pull up and, might not want to quote during these times. And that kind of leaves the AMM with more toxic flow and toxic orders. So we're still trying to kind of figure out a way to prevent that and to make sure that the flow is more balanced on both sides during both volatile and more stable periods.
Well, thank you very much for that, Cindy. Thank you all for giving an overview on your protocol design. It is very interesting to see the different ways that we're all solving for a similar problem. I think I want to move on now to a separate section, which might be a little less optimistic. It's more just addressing some of the more common critiques and criticisms leveraged on-chain Perps DEXs. I think we might start off a little bit more generally, and Cindy, I might throw this one to you. But perhaps there is this perception that on-chain Perps trading is perhaps suffers from issues associated with low liquidity, such as high fees, spreads, and perhaps high slippage as well. Do you think that this perception is true? And if not, perhaps why you think that this perception exists?
I think to an extent, to compare liquidity to centralized exchange, definitely we're not there yet. From I think just a general like spread and volume point of view, we still have a long way to go to even execute large orders on chain. I think we still rely a lot on centralized exchange pricing, because I guess anything that depends on an oracle will ultimately depend on a centralized exchange pricing it, and then kind of depending on external arbitrageurs to come in and make sure that prices are aligned on AMMs that are not based on oracles. So I would say liquidity still comes from centralized exchanges. And I'm curious to hear what you guys think as well on what happens when is the flip between when liquidity sort of starts flowing into DEXs and DEXs start pricing these derivatives as opposed to the other way around, because that's sort of what happened in a lot of long tail assets in Uniswap, right? You start seeing Uniswap become the oracle for a lot of these long tail assets instead. I wonder, is it like permissionless markets that needs to be unlocked for us to see DEXs price these assets over centralized exchanges, or is it just more interest in the DEX space that will create that change in where prices come from? So I think it's inevitable. I think it has to come. Just but the question is sort of like what it takes for us to get there.
Yeah, I feel like I can hop in here and I'll kind of plug GMX a little bit, but like I think that this was like one of the things, like we're talking about toxic flow, we're talking about like arbitrageurs, how it's difficult for LPs to make money, and like that was one of kind of GMX's like key design choices is borrowing, since that is a very hard thing to do, like borrowing the price from centralized exchanges. And after we kind of updated our flow on the perp trades to kind of the trader submits the order, we pull the prices from the exchange, make sure it's within their slippage band, and then execute the price. That kind of, I feel like we've solved that problem pretty well on Bitcoin and Ethereum. But then that kind of like opens up like, okay, like how are you going to price these long tail assets, which the Oracle model, like that's definitely not its strength. Like we've kind of explored some options, as in, so like, I guess like for instance, like you can open like a $10 million long on Bitcoin on GMX with zero slippage. It's pulling directly from FTX, Binance, some other centralized exchanges, and then executing at that price, just plus the 10 basis point fee. And for Bitcoin, that's not that big a deal. But like if you start to talk about something like a longer tail asset, a $10 million order could be massive slippage. So like this would be circumventing the slippage, kind of allowing for market manipulation, or kind of not market manipulation, but like kind of oracle manipulation, like, and could be like value extracted from LPs. So I think this is kind of like there's kind of two parts to this question. Firstly, like a lot of like I'm not sure like leverage trading should be enabled on like an asset's below like a certain threshold of liquidity, just because it opens up a lot of risks. But then if we're talking about some kind of like assets in the middle, we've kind of like explored ideas of like synthetic slippage, like simulating what that market order would do on an order book, like Binance or FTX, or kind of simulating it against like a UniV2, UniV3 pool to kind of like help calculate the prices correctly. But it's definitely a big question. I think like UniV2 has found like an excellent niche in kind of these longer tail assets, but kind of adding leverage on top of that makes things like quite a bit more difficult. And it's also a two-sided equation, right? So you have like leveraged, like liquidity providing or allowing leverage trading is just kind of like leveraging the effects of both fees and permanent loss. And what we've seen so far across like UniV2 and even UniV3 is a lot of these AMMs, like the impermanent loss outweighs the fees collected. So I think like maybe you could start enabling this sort of trading if you were to increase fees on some of these lower liquidity coins to actually like incentivize market maker, or not market makers, but liquidity providers to come in and provide liquidity. But below a certain threshold, like I just honestly think that it's very difficult to add leverage. And yeah, like even on centralized exchanges, right? Like for some of these smaller caps, like there's requirements.
Yeah, I also want to jump in on that. Yeah, it's very hard for those. I mean, like especially like a really new token. I mean, like if we enable like a perpetual market on that token right away, definitely there are lots of attack factor that I mean, like it just drain all the insurance fund. I mean, like it's so easily because you can manipulate the price at the spot end and also the perpetual end. So it's really hard. I mean, personally, I think we probably will follow the central exchange. I mean, like for example, like BitMEX, they have been, they only trade like Bitcoin for a very long time, only like one market. So I mean, like I think we will. I mean, like for perpetual, I mean, decentralized perpetual DEX, we have to grow the biggest like Bitcoin ETH market first. I mean, for some time until we kind of like have this kind of like a similar like trading volume as the central exchange. I think that's the time we can take a look at those like medium cap like tokens and then the rest. That's what I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in again. I just to like kind of reiterate this point, I saw a really good tweet. I'm forgetting who it was from, but basically they said like for some of these longer tail like UniV2 assets, like LPing if fees were like 5 or 10% might not be such a big issue. And obviously like that's a pretty high fee, but like it's just kind of exaggerating the point a bit, because like 30 bips fee, like from a standard UniV2 pool on some of these assets that are incredibly volatile, just isn't really attractive for LPs, right? And I think that if you're going to be trading in these more volatile assets and kind of going out along the risk curve, like there's also more upside potential and kind of downside potential for shorts. So like I think fees definitely should be higher, and it could kind of provide a solution to kind of like increase liquidity provision on those coins. But yeah, it's just really hard to do leverage trading on coins that don't have a lot of liquidity, because as Yenwen said, it opens up a ton of attack vectors, and obviously like safety and LP profitability is really important for the success of these decentralized exchanges.
Mm-hmm. And even just piggybacking off that, like I never considered it from that perspective, Duncan, but yeah, like increasing the fees associated with trading more volatile long tail assets is something that I think retail would actually be interested in doing if the option was there. Like if you were able to leverage trade like the next hot shitcoin at the moment, having to pay a high fee is something that's probably like a reasonable ask for them. Okay, I'll move on into a little bit more protocol-specific critiques as well. That way we can sort of let each of us address something that's may have been in the market or something that may be a misconception about our particular designs. I'll start with Perpetual Protocol Yenwen. I think between our two teams, we've had some similar critiques on the design of the AMM and perhaps the risk of the long-short imbalance and how that sort of has flow-on effects.
There are actually several solutions. I mean, like we have been like discussed, I mean, this for several months. I remember in like 2021, in the end, we picked the Perp v2 route we built on top of Uniswap v3 because we want the long short to be balanced. You guys do rebalance when the price goes up, and then you try to put, balance that. I think that's really cool. We have been like thinking about that. That's one way. The only reason that we don't go down this route is that it's a little bit complex. We actually do lots of like scenario analysis and then simulations, but we just feel that it's so big, too complex. To us. So that's why we don't go down that route. But you guys Drift handled that really well. I think that's one of the critiques that we have. But you guys actually demo that. It's actually doable. You can rebalance that. So I think that's one of the things. I think, it's to us, it's definitely like we learn a lot, like from like running like Perpetual Protocol V1, especially on the design. I think personally, Drift, you guys work on this like rebalance. I think that really pushed this forward. Most of the people, to be honest, in the field, they just EOFARM. They just create a protocol, they EOFARM. They don't really think about the new things. And you guys, also like GMX. That's really an interesting model that, actually combining spot trading is really interesting. We want to do that as well, but we don't know how to do that. But that's really great. You should be able to build everything like all in one and then leverage each other. But no matter like how we end up solving that VAMM problem, we did a lot of innovation along the road. I think that's really important. I think that's what I would say. And Perpetual Protocol V2, we solved this long short skew because there is no long short skew. We kind of avoid that problem. But I think that's my answer to this question. For long short skew. The second thing is that I think Noodle on Twitter, he mentioned that majority, the liquidity on Perpetual Protocol actually V1 and V2, come from the team, not really the team, the DAO or like combination. That's actually true. Every time we sell a new thing, we provide liquidity on our own. I believe that most of the projects do that. It's not. I don't think it's the best thing. They are like traders, LPs. The team. Using these projects. We just, we need to attract the traders, LPs. One of the way to do this is, just for lots of rewards, like liquidity mining, like most of the project do. I think that works, right? So, for us, like I said before, liquidity provision on Uniswap v3 actually is a little bit harder than we think, and also for the normal user. So it's that's why we want to. The other way, of course, we talk to lots of like professional market maker at the beginning, but we did, but we also do that at the beginning. So our liquidity provision start from 100%. I think it actually goes down to 30% right now. So only 30% of the liquidity is provided by the team. To be honest, we want every liquidity provided will be outside of the projects or of the teams. I think that would be optimal. But I actually think that we should provide liquidity because we are actually getting good at this. So just from the trader, we are a builder, but we also have some of the traders in the team, and they are actually coming. They coming on new strategy every week, so we just test that. So I think that's interesting to actually become the kind of a market maker or trader. We are not a market maker or trader before, but it's very interesting. So I think we will continue to do that. But to be honest, it's a fair. We don't really get any preference. Everything just like a smart contract. A team don't really have any age. we just do the no more like liquidity provision. So yeah, that's my answer to this on Twitter. I mean, people see one thing and then they just think, I mean, like maybe like, oh, the team provide liquidity at the beginning. It's not really a bad thing. I mean, like we don't get any preference. I think that's the key. I mean, DeFi ensures, I mean, like smart contract ensures that everyone, you know, is like kind of like on the same playground that, you know, nobody get preference. And I think that's definitely, yeah, that's why I want to say.
For context, do you have like figures for how much external LPs are contributing to Perp V2 now, and how much is from the team?
So we have like 30% from the team and 70% from eternal. Some people we know, some people actually we don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really curious to ask this question. Sorry for jumping in, but so you have like Solana markets listed on Perp V2, and or right now like you have Solana, like it's tradable Sol, right?
Yeah.
So how because you guys are on Optimism, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So how like is Solana's not like native to Optimism? So is that like a wrapped token or like a bridged in token, or like how is kind of, or is that all virtual?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's all virtual. So our mechanism is more like FTX. So you don't really need to hold the underlying. You just like have the, so we use chaining. So if we can get the chaining price feed, then we can create that market.
Yeah, but yeah, so like, are you guys planning to add more kind of like different types of collateral, so people can do like that, like the ETH, like cash and carry trade where, so typically like just to explain everything, like everyone wants to be, or like a lot of people think crypto want to be long. So typically you have to pay this funding to be long, and then these delta neutral traders will come in and deposit the actual collateral. So like, let's say it's ETH on the ETH market, they'll deposit ETH as the collateral for the position, and then go 1x short, kind of farming that funding fee and being in like kind of a synthetic US dollar position. So like to kind of help with like obviously the long short skew issue gets transferred like away from the protocol onto the LPs, but I think it's still probably optimal if you can balance it out naturally. So like, have you guys thought about possibly like bridging in assets so people can do the cash and carry trade that I'm kind of describing, and like adding more collaterals? Is that something that you guys are thinking about?
Yeah, that's definitely what we are thinking. So we have already at ETH, and I think Brahma has already built, like you said, you know, like cash and carry trades on top of it. So we already have like people building like basis trade on top of us. We want to add more like I mean like collateral. But one of the limit we have is we need kind of like we have a criteria that the longest, and one of the criteria is that we need a spot market on Optimism. So I mean, Perpetual Protocol is on Optimism that provide enough liquidity so that we can actually estimate. I mean, once we need to liquidate this asset, we have enough exit liquidity on the chain itself. So that's actually the main blocker right now. So most of the assets that don't have enough liquidity on Optimism.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because that's definitely something that we're thinking through at GMX is like, how can we provide more assets? Obviously, everything in GLP is like fully backed. All of our positions are fully backed by the collateral, but just kind of like exploring what are the best options to add more assets for trading.
This actually kind of leads into one of the questions that I was going to ask you, Duncan, and it's on the limitations of assets available on offer with the GMX model. But yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I guess it's like two different ways you can look at this. One is just what I mentioned about like having the asset natively available in the current GLP model. The second one is the Oracle issue that I was speaking about before. So obviously, if the less liquid asset, then it's difficult to list under our current mechanism because of like potential like attack vectors and price manipulation. So I guess like we're approaching this two ways, like potentially launching on more chains in the future to provide more assets, looking at potentially bridged assets, looking at providing these assets but then having a real emphasis on correcting for the long short skew. But then that kind of goes into what I was talking about Yenwen about, where if the asset's not natively available, it's difficult to find the shorts to kind of balance that skew out. So it's definitely a lot of things that we're thinking about, but still like the majority of volume within crypto is Bitcoin and ETH perps. And I think that if we see like some big opportunities that will either like potentially bridge the assets in, figure out this long short skew issue, or kind of like launch new chains, I think those are kind of like the three main options. And then some kind of more exotic options like the synthetics model with like kind of the GD token.
And just before we conclude for GMX, do you want to talk a little bit about the nuances and benefits and restrictions perhaps of the GLP liquidity pool?
Yeah, so what I think the biggest benefit is really, like I said, you're outsourcing all that difficult hard work of market making that we've spent a long part of this call talking about to the professional market makers on centralized exchanges, right? So that's a limitation in the sense that GMX, it won't be able to become like the most liquid place to trade Bitcoin because it doesn't have the price discovery mechanism itself. But kind of as we said in the beginning of this call, like the DEX market for Perps is still only 2% of the entire market, like the other 98% of volumes on centralized exchanges. So GMX still has, before that becomes an issue. Then if that does become an issue, we can kind of look at implementing these synthetic slippage models to kind of help protect LPs. But kind of in the same vein of that, we are generating like a lot of fees because we don't have to have this kind of like fixed ratio of assets, like 50-50 or whatever it is to calculate the price. So GLP utilization can be like hundreds of percent in a day, and it has been in the past because we don't have to maintain this fixed ratio of assets. So the fees so far we've seen have kind of like more than made up for any of that kind of like toxic flow that might be happening, or kind of like those limitations. And it's all passive liquidity, right? So I think that's why it's really interesting. Right now, I think GLP is paying out a 20% APR in ETH, and you still have exposure to stuff like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and stable coins. So it's pretty nice as a liquidity provider. And like the reason we're able to do that is because of this kind of like this mechanism of borrowing prices from different centralized exchanges. But then again, like if we want to talk about like listing longer tail assets, I think I touched upon that. But so there's definitely some trade-offs, but I think like currently, given the size of the decentralized per market compared to the centralized one, these trade-offs make a lot of sense. And kind of if we ever are like rivaling like Binance or some of these bigger exchanges in volume, then that's kind of like a good problem to have. And I think it's definitely something that'll be innovated on.
Okay, I think we only have a short little time left, so I'll quickly skip over to Cindy and on some of Drift's critiques, and then we can sort of give a concluding statement before we finish this. But Cindy, obviously, Drift v1 was sunsetted, and like a large criticism that was leveled at the protocol was sort of the design flaw behind, or the supposed design flaw behind the AMM and collateralizing a lot of the positions. So do you want to talk a bit about that and perhaps how we're fixing that in V2?
Yeah, I think it's quite similar to, I guess, the critiques made for Perp V1. It was not enough collateralization in the pool to kind of back these positions, which obviously I think it's like a core focus for a protocol like GMX. So in V2, obviously introducing more counterparties, and also we're gonna be adding a way for passive LPs to get involved. So liquidity providers can actually stake into the VAMM and receive part of the net position of the VAMM to try to hedge out that risk to more parties, and also receive a percentage of trading fees. And then I think, yeah, that was the main critique. We're also adding cross collateral in V2, which will allow for trades like the sort of funding rate arbitrage trades over a long period of time to short perps when funding rates are high, to allow that long short skew to be more neutralized in V2. So yeah, that's kind of how we're addressing a lot of the V1 critiques.
And then I think there's also a follow-up one here as well. With the just-in-time mechanism, given that there's going to be a 5-second delay before taker orders are filled either by a maker or by the DAMM, how does that mechanism protect itself against front running?
Yeah, I think interestingly enough, we sort of want front running in this case, because that leads to the best price for the user. So the more the earlier makers submit their bid, the better the price gets for the user. So in a way, like we want makers to compete with each other. If let's say it's an order that nobody wants to take, then yeah, there will be like no front running, I suppose, because that just goes straight to the AMM. But I guess in a competitive market and in a regular market condition, you would actually try to get market makers to front run each other. So we're also figuring out ways to optimize that particular market making strategy to like depending on market conditions. And yeah, looking to kind of open source a bot that everyone can also use.
All right, well, we're just coming up on the hour-and-a-half mark today. I might let each of you guys go through perhaps where you see the market in 6 to 12 months, or even just where your roadmap is going to be in the next 6 to 12 months. And then we can finish this very, very educational podcast today. Yenwen, do you want to start off?
Yep, I think that for the next 6 to 12 months, the first thing is that I hope that the market will bounce back, because I mean, like, definitely we need more people interested in trading, and like bull market definitely interests more people than bear market. So hopefully that will happen. And but I think on the product, and I mean several good things about the DEX like in general is like layer 2 is become more mature. We are on Optimism, GMX on Arbitron, and I think that I mean ETH Foundation is going to have this merge, and there will be like fee like reduction. I mean the future for layer 2. So there are lots of good things about layer 2. Hopefully it attracts more users. Like I mean like for this, I think that would be like one thing to watch. And the second thing is that we talk about this, like how hard it is to market make on like Uniswap with this scale like AM. I think at least from like our talk to like others and ourselves, I think this, I mean people are getting familiar with like how to provide liquidity there, and I believe in like 6 months, like or maybe like this year, I mean, people will be more familiar with like providing liquidity on Uniswap B3 scale AM, just like providing liquidity on central exchange on Orderbook scale exchange. So I think that would change. So hopefully it will also benefit the like Perpetual protocol. Yeah. Other than that, I mean, like I think our main focus right now is working with like other projects to build on top of us. We are kind of like so. I mean, I would say that we believe in like composability a lot, and then we just want to have like try to be the best like projects that people can become if they want to get leverage. They can build on top of us. Yeah. So I think that would be our goal. Like I mean, like for the 6 to 12 months. Yeah.
And Duncan for GMX.
Yeah, in terms of like general market and L2s, I completely agree with everything Yenwen said. GMX specifically, I think we're just focusing on attracting the most volume possible, extending the assets we can support, and then also composability. So we have like Drawbacks working on a product. I think Umami just launched their delta neutral vault for GLP, and just as more DeFi kind of like develops on Arbitrum and Avalanche, just the more integrations we can get, I think is kind of the better. Just really leaning into that composability angle that is unique versus centralized exchanges.
And to conclude, Cindy for Drift.
Yep. I think over the next like 6 to 12 months, Perps, DEX Perp space is probably going to evolve quite a lot. It seems to be quite a lot of new players entering the space for DEX Perps, which means that's just different avenues for pricing and potentially more traders to come in as a result. on chains launching as well as like existing chains. And then I think that's probably going to lead to a big flow of new market makers to try to enter the space and become liquidity providers for these protocols. So that should be a positive. I'm quite excited for that. And then I think overall, I think the sentiment and narrative is going to start picking up for perpetuals on chain, just with the amounts of, I guess, distrust for centralized exchanges these days. There's definitely going to be a lot more demand for non-custodial trading from both a safety, regulatory point of view. So really excited for the inflow of traders and volume to come in from that.
Beautifully put. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for taking this hour and a half to join this. In particular, thank you, Duncan, and thank you, Yenwen, as well. It was a really nice podcast.
Yeah, it's great to speak with everyone. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, guys. It was great.
Alrighty, okay. See you, everyone.